Glad that you're here with us. COVID kind of hit us hard, kind of hit everybody hard. And I've talked to our elders about that, and we've talked about it quite a bit, not just our congregation, but about every congregation that we've talked to. It's had an effect on them. And one of the effects that probably we didn't really see or maybe didn't think much about, and I don't know how to say this, just be blunt about it, but, we've all got just a little bit lazy, because we didn't have to do anything for so long. we were separated, and we weren't really fellowshipping. We weren't having meals together. Funerals even were restricted. People couldn't get together. We didn't visit with one another like we should have. We didn't do these things because of this disease, this illness that had overtaken our country, and we still struggle with that, but yet we're coming together and we're doing things again together, and we've got to kind of regroup and got to kind of get our mind back where it's supposed to be as Christians. It's kind of been a real principle in Christianity, because Christ always wanted us to be together, didn't he? He knew we needed each other, and the idea of us not being around each other was really contradictory to what God would have us to be as his people. I think when you look at the writer of Hebrews, he says, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves as the habit of some, but what does he say? Encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day approaching. The idea that you and I need to be an encouragement to each other, and an encouragement to those around us. And the way we do that is by being with each other and being involved with one another in things that we do. And this church is a church of great involvement, and it always has been. But it's also a place now that we're having to remake our lists, and people are getting put in the bulletin, and people are coming to Susie and saying, I didn't know that I was on this, and she's having a hard time getting people where they need to be. And so we need to redo ourselves. And also, if you're a member here, you know that we send out SK notifies. We send out notifies by text. We send out notifies by email, and we need to update people's phone numbers. We need to update your email addresses. We need to get things back on track. We need to redo our online directory. A lot of these things are in the works, and we're doing those things, and the guys are going to hand you out forms. If you're a member here, we want you to fill these out. If you can fill them out today, that's great. If you've been here a long time, you've filled these out before, we're asking you to do it again, because we want to get you where you need to be. But before you get to the part about serving and where you think you want to serve, wait till the end of the sermon to do that part. The other parts you can fill out. That's not going to change. Your name won't change during this sermon, I promise. And probably not your address, I hope. But other things might. So hang with me on this thing a little bit, right? In Romans chapter 8, it says that those he called, he predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Romans 8:29. And oftentimes we use that in a lot of ways in our world. And we think, I need to be conformed to Jesus. I need to look like Jesus, act like Jesus. But the truth is, if we're really going to be conformed to the image of Christ, what did Christ really look like? I think that's a question we really have to ask ourselves. And I think if I ask you to give me descriptive ideas of Jesus, you would come up with a lot of different perspectives. And if I said, give me who Jesus was, and a lot of you say, well, he was love. I can agree with that. I'm good with that, right? If you say, well, he was compassionate, I can agree with that. He was caring. I can agree with that, right? I can agree with that. He was a caring individual. He's a compassionate individual. He was a loving individual. But beyond that, if I want to look like him, what do I do? There has to be action involved in that, right? Has to be action involved in looking like someone, being like someone, conforming to an image, as the scripture said. And if I really had to say what Jesus was more than any other thing, is that Jesus was a servant. Jesus was continually surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Now, whether those was selfish motivation or whether it was a sincere motivation, I guess we would have to take that on an individual basis. But Jesus was surrounded by people who desired something from him. And it's interesting that in the life of Christ, he never really worried about himself. You know, when Jesus went to the cross, Jesus didn't have to ask questions like, is my will done? Right? What am I going to leave my stuff to? Right? What am I going to do with my property? What am I going to do with my things? Because when Jesus went to the cross, what he owned was on his back, his robe. Why was that? Because Jesus didn't serve Jesus. Jesus served us. Jesus served mankind. Jesus served those around him, and that was taxing on him. And I understand that, because when you serve other people, there's a sacrifice to be paid for that. You're going to give up something to serve someone else every time. Every time. You're either going to give up some time, maybe you wanted to go do something, maybe a plan you had made. You're going to give up maybe some money to go do it, some energy. You're going to make a sacrifice, because that's what serving others inevitably is about. It's about giving them something of yourself, giving them something of who you are, of what you have to offer. You know, I know this congregation, and I know we got a lot of people not here today. I understand that. But I know everybody in this congregation pretty well. And I know this for fact. If this congregation as a group, if we decided to do just about any endeavor that we wanted to do, and we all together put our minds to do it, I don't care if it was starting a business, if it was building a house, if it was whatever, you name the project, we could do it. There's enough intelligence and enough talent and enough muscle to do anything that we desire to do as a group. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that statement? And God has given us these abilities. Do you agree with that statement? God has endowed us with the ability to do things, whatever that might be. And when I look out at this congregation, and those of you who aren't here, and those of you that are here, and those of you that are online, you know what I see? I see, for the most part, people who are industrious, who are successful, who are hardworking, who are intelligent, educated people. A lot of talent in this room. You might not believe it, but I believe it. I believe if you took our church as a whole and we all fell out of a plane onto a desert island, one of them what-if scenarios, we all fell out of a plane onto a desert island, that we would be just fine. Because that's how much talent exists in this building. Jesus gave so much to those who had so little. And the lesson of that is this. When you give to those who have so little, you will get nothing in return. Now, that goes against the world. Because the world says, what's in it for me? It's all right if I give, but what do I get? What's it worth? Jesus, I want you to think about a passage that we don't think much about for a minute with me. And it's when John the Baptist was doubting Christ. And John sends a messenger to Jesus. And he says, are you the one we look for? Or is there someone else? Right? And Jesus says, go tell John, the deaf hear, the blind see, the lame walk. Listen to the last thing he says. The poor had the gospel preached to them. You know, we don't think much about that little statement, do we? But that was who Christ was. He was concerned about those who lacked, those who didn't have, those who needed him, those who he could be a blessing to. That was his concern. You know, Jesus was concerned about them being hungry. They said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish," and they all ate and were satisfied. They picked up what was left over, the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. You know, Jesus didn't have to care. The people around him didn't care. What did they say? "You need to send these people off so they can go get something to eat." Isn't that what they said? "Those people are hungry, Jesus. You need to quit talking. Send them away so they can go get something. They can take care of themselves, so they can get something to eat." And Jesus says, "I'm going to feed them right here." Right? And then they said, this is, of course, Rex's great paraphrase, right? "How are we going to do that?" And they said, "Well, we've got these 5 loaves and these 2 fish." And Jesus says, "That's enough." You know, Jesus looked to people's needs, and not just looked to their needs, but how to meet those needs, how to meet what was people needed him to do. And of course, he was the Son of God. He had this miraculous ability, and he could do that. But I'm telling you, God's given you and I a lot of miraculous abilities. If you think about it, the ability that we have to do the things we do. You know, Jesus was concerned about those who were sick. John 9, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, spat on the ground, made clay. You know, probably the story I should have used here, because I think it's the best story of Jesus in healing myself. And that's the man at the Pool of Bethesda. That story just always haunts me. Because, you know, that pool was right where everybody went to walk into the temple. They all walked by that pool. You had to get into the temple. And every day, those Pharisees, and those Sadducees, and those pious Jews, they walked right by that pool. And those people were laying there every single day. They laid there. And you know, if you really look at the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus really keyed on what their response was to those who were ill. Right? "Stay away from me, because you are unclean. And I don't want to be unclean." And so every day they walked by. And you know those people that ask to beg for money? You know, you've all had them people, right? That you see on the side of the road, or maybe you're walking down the street. If you've ever been to some places, you're walking down the street and those people are begging for money. What do you do if you're not going to give them money? What do you do? Don't look at them. Right? Don't make eye contact, because they'll suck you right in. Right? Just being honest here. So what do? You just walk by, and you just ignore them like they're not there. They're not there. I don't see you. You don't exist. Right? I'm not trying to tell you to stop and give them money. I'm just using this as an example. And so those people walked by these people every day and never looked at them. Never even looked at them. And Jesus walks by the pool, and he sees that man there, the cripple, the paralytic, laying there. And Jesus looks at him. And throughout all these healing stories of the Bible, these people in a society where sickness was equated with sin, sickness was equated with God turning himself away from you. And Jesus looked at these people. And he looked them in the eye, and he loved them, and he cared for them, and he healed them. And you know, the funny thing is, this guy that was blind, the guy that laid at the pool, they were nobody to almost everybody. They were somebody to Jesus. You see, that's the image of Christ. The image of Christ is looking at people that the world overlooks. The image of Christ is being a servant when you're never going to get paid back. The image of Christ is for people to see your love, your compassion. Because that's who Jesus was. In those stories, it's compassion. The woman with the issue of blood that touched the hem of his garment, nobody cared about her. Nobody cared about her at all. Did they? She goes through the crowd and she's on the ground. People are stepping on her and walking on her, and there's a crowd. Can you imagine it? In the dirt, in the dust, in the muck. She's reaching, touch that hem, touch that garment, and she touches it. And the thing about that story is, these people are all around Jesus. Everybody's touching him, right? Everybody's touching him. But when she touches him, he sees her. Who touched me? You see, that's Jesus. And that's the image that he expects us to be. In John 13:5, he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. You know the Last Supper, right? The Last Supper. The lowest office we always hear in the house was the washing of feet, to wash someone's feet. And Jesus, the teacher, the master, the rabbi, the Savior, the Messiah, all those terminologies, all those words, Jesus does the most humble thing he can do. Peter's offended. I should wash your feet. Ah, Peter, you don't let me wash your feet. You have no part with me. And Peter says, oh, wash my head too. Oh, your feet's enough. You know, what's the lesson? The lesson is that Jesus calls us to be servants. And if we're not servants, we're really not conformed to the image of Christ. And service is sacrifice. There's no way you can separate those two things. When you help someone else, you give up something of yours. I understand that. But I also understand the reward. Jesus says, even the Son of Man has not come to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus' heart was a servant heart. And in this congregation, there are so many of you who have servant hearts. There are so many of you who do so much that nobody knows. So much that only God knows. But you know. But at times we need to do things for one another, each other here. There's times we need to think about us as a group, as a family. In this family, there's things we have to do. In order for us to do and be what we are, and to do those things we need to do, there's things that we have to do. And a lot of those people who have done those things for many, many years in this congregation have gone to their reward. A lot of them have. And people have stepped up into their place. But in times we're getting pretty thin. There's times we need to think, what can I do? How can I be of service? What can I do? We all lead busy lives. I understand that. In prosperity in this congregation, the prosperity that God has allowed us to have has in many ways hindered our ability to be servants in this church, to be servants here. But you and I need to find a way to overcome that and to work around that. Even when there's times we can't be here, we still need to find ways to serve and to do those things that God would call us, to do. Paul says in Romans 12, if service in his serving, he who teaches in his teaching, or he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Let love be without hypocrisy, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, and give preference to one another in honor. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. There's a lot of verbs in that passage, right? And I'm not very good at English, but I do know that verbs are action, right? And there's a lot of verbs in that passage. Paul's saying there's a lot that each one of us can do. There's a lot that we all can do for this church and for this community and for the Lord. And that you and I have the ability and the means to do this. In 1 Corinthians 12:8, it says, there are varieties of ministries, but the same Lord. Now I want you to think this morning about what your strengths are. There are so many ministries, so many ways that we can serve the Lord and we can serve this church. We can serve Him by teaching. We can serve Him by doing things here, and that's true. We can do that. But I want you to think of other things, things that I see now, that people have died that did it, that we don't have any more to do those things, and we need people to step up, and you're those people, and I'm that person, and I understand that. You know, one thing I see that we struggle with now is getting food to people who have lost loved ones. Boy, for years, we had a couple of ladies. Yulene was great about that. I never had to say anything. If somebody died, she was at the house with a trunk full, with a trunk load of food, right? You know, you don't think that's a big thing, but that's a huge ministry. People that have people coming in when someone dies and they die suddenly and they don't have food in the house or a way to feed them, and you show up with sandwiches, and it's nothing big. You go to Homeland, you buy a bunch of sandwich stuff, some chips, go to KFC, buy a bucket of chicken, do whatever, take it, bring it, so they have stuff to eat and stuff to drink. That's huge when someone dies in your household. That's a huge ministry, right? People to sit with people that are sick. People that can go and take that responsibility and say, I can sit with this person for a few hours. I can stay with this person overnight in the hospital. Those are ministries we don't often think a lot about, but those are huge ministries in the Lord's body to do that. You know, to comfort the sick, to comfort the bereaved, those are huge things. And to help with our fellowship meals and our Wednesday night meals and the food bank program and all those other things that go on here regularly. Those things that have gone on for so long. Funeral dinners. What a huge comfort when Sue and Becky and other women in the congregation, when they make those dinners, and that card that was read before, they're thanking them for the dinner and for those people who had brought food. To even bring dishes to a funeral dinner. That's a huge ministry to do that. All those things are huge things. To mail out the bulletins, Hilda does that. To send cards to people who live visitors cards and say, we're glad that you came and can we help you? That's another ministry that can be done. There's so many things you can do, from sending cards to checking on our kids to helping fill the backpack deals to doing all these other things, and things that you might know of that I don't even know about. Things that you can do for the Lord. Things that you can do for this church, for this congregation, so that we as a body, as a family, can function the way that God wants us to do, giving preference to one another in honor, serving with diligence each other, and serving this community in the way that God expects us to do it. You know, there's so many things on that sheet that you're filling out that are important for us to do. Fellowship meals, cleaning up after fellowship meals. I don't know if we still do greeters. We used to do greeters at the door, people to welcome people when they come in. I don't even know if we have people that do that, if we do that now or not. We used to put that in the bulletin before COVID. And we had that going on. Song leaders, people to lead prayer, people to teach classes. Ask to Jay, ask to talk to Jim. Always a struggle, get people to teach classes. Some people say, well, I can't be here every week. I travel some. It's okay. Take the responsibility. Prepare communion. That's another thing that we do to prepare communion. Take the responsibility and say, I'm not going to be here every Sunday, but I'll take the lead and I'll find somebody to fill in for me when I can't be here. Do it. Make the sacrifice. Do it for the Lord. Do it for this church. Do it for this congregation, because that's what we have to do in order that the people that are doing this now are not getting so overworked that they get burned out with the things that they're doing. If we share the load, right? If we share the load, it's a whole lot easier to bear than if one or two people try to carry it all on themselves. We all worship here. We all serve here. We all love to be here. We all need to contribute to here, because that's what the Lord expects you and I to do. That was his example. That's the confirmation, being conformed to his image. That's what that's about. And brethren, I know that you all are also giving, and it's not that I'm standing up here and I'm not browbeating you, telling you need to do more. Well, I guess I kind of am. What I'm doing is we need to get back on track. We've just fallen off with this COVID and being separated and everything. We've just fallen off from being who we were before we went through this. And we've got to get back. It's like Brent says, we just got to scratch our way back. And that's what we're doing. We're scratching our way back a little bit at a time, getting people back here, getting attendance back here, getting ourselves going again, and getting ourselves back where God would have us to be. Because, some of those things that are done are habits to some of us. And when you fall out of that habit for a while, it's hard to get back into it. Am I right? When you fall out of a habit for a little bit, it's hard to get back. But we got to get back. We're here. We got to get moving. We got to get back. And we can do it together. Me too. Me too. I'm not just talking to you. Me too. We got to get going again. And we got to get back to where we were. Because the Lord tells us, he says what? He says, where your heart is, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. Is that right? Brethren, my sister, she drove a truck, and of course she passed away a few years ago, but my sister was running hard. They were kind of behind on stuff, and one day she parked the truck. It was there, and I said, what are you doing? And she goes, well, she says, I'm going to a Sunday school training class. And I said, don't you need to work today? And she said, well, she says, I want to store up treasure in heaven. And about 3 years after that, she died of cancer. And I often think about that day, and I thought, if she would have drove that truck that day, who would have cared? But she knew where her treasure needed to be. Not here, but up there. I told you at the beginning of this, when you serve, you sacrifice. They go hand in hand, right together. But what I didn't tell you at the beginning that I'm telling you now is that sacrifice in God's kingdom has great reward. Jesus says, be conformed to my image. Be conformed to me, who I am. And Jesus hung on a cross. With nothing to his name but a robe that they cast lots for. You think Jesus thought it was worth it? And when Stephen was being stoned in Acts, chapter 7, Stephen looked and he said, behold, I see heaven open. What did he say? And Jesus sitting at the right hand of the throne of God. Brethren, I want my treasure there. Because what we do here, if it doesn't count up there, what difference does it really make? Fill these things out. Think about it. Pray about it. Step up and do what we can do to serve each other in this community, and more importantly, be the hands and the feet of Jesus Christ our Lord on this earth. If we can help you in any way, won't you let it be known while we stand?